Okay, welcome back. In today's video, I want to go over quadtrees and octrees. So this is a really useful data structure that's commonly employed in things like video games. But as we'll be seeing, right, its use cases are very extensive just because of how nicely and easy it is to implement. Well, it's used for spatial search, image processing, collision detection in games. It's used in ray tracing engines to do hit detection, and it's also even used in simulations. So things like galaxy simulations I've seen online, where it can kind of help in kind of knowing where your mass is kind of located and speed up physics calculations therein. So then let's talk about what even are quadtrees and octrees. To begin with, quadtrees are going to be our 2D equivalent of this idea, right? So essentially we're going to be separating our environment recursively into what are rectangles, quads, right? Octrees then is the 3D equivalent where we're using octants instead, okay? So we're going to spend most of this video talking about the 2D equivalent, quadtrees, and then the extensions to 3D I'll draw up very briefly, but they are very obvious. Okay, so the main idea here is that unlike a standard grid map, right, where I would have to draw in all my grid lines and then I'm storing data for absolutely every cell therein, when you have these uniform sized cells, pixels, whatever you want to call them, well, obviously that gives us great resolution, but a lot of that resolution is wasted, right? So when we look at a real world problem, whether we're talking about like dots, so things like galaxies, maybe these are moving obstacles, things like this, or I've just drawn in a few static obstacles here. At some point in time, right, our job is to approximate at some level of resolution how we're going to represent this data. Well, as humans, we see that most of this environment is completely open, empty space, right? So quadtrees are abusing that information. We are going to be recursively partitioning the space, right, and building a tree representation of the data, but we're going to be able to make it much more compact by essentially only gaining higher resolution around areas that are important, areas that actually have obstacles in it. So let's talk how we do that. So essentially every time we're going to be recursively partitioning the space into 4 equally sized regions. So how would I do that? In this world here, I would partition the space in the first iteration into 4 blocks. So how does the tree here work? We have a root, of course. This was the entire area of the map. What we're going to be doing is recursively continuing this iteration and continuing to create the branches, right? To separate each node, to partition one more time. Anytime there still remains an obstacle within it, up to some, we will have to enforce, right, some level of resolution, some depth that we're accepting in this situation. So maybe I will, just for the beginning, I'll label these to help us. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so if I were to draw these up then, we have our 4 quads, our 4 new cells, okay? What we will be doing is in each of these, we're going to recursively continue to partition in the case that they contain obstacles. From the get-go, right, we're seeing that maybe I'll underline these just to show when they end. This is going to be a leaf node. The region 2 here has no obstacles within it, so we're actually done. Instead of having to represent this with how many small squares we're already starting to see, that is one single node. That is completely open space. We're going to have to deal with neighbors, right, adjacent neighbors of these cells in different ways. But this is still extremely easy. So if we're looking for collision detection, we're looking for a ray trace, well, if something goes into this region, it's very fast and easy to return. There's nothing there, right? There's nothing to worry about. And so that is where quadtrees really start to be useful. So to continue the example then, we will continue to recurse and to look at this. So I'll move across my D just to have a bit more room. Okay, so we've divided the quadrant 1 into 4 additional quadrants, right? I'm going to stop naming them. I'm just going to start drawing them, right? But I'm following, I think, the general ordering, right, where it was like top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So we would see that this still has obstacles. We have to partition it. Boom, 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 boom. Now, interestingly enough though, right, only one of these still has a obstacle within it. I'm going to say in this case, so this is 1 iteration, 2 iterations, 3 iterations. I'm going to say 4 iterations is max, right? So my depth limit is 4, because again, you can adjust this based on how much resolution you want, but also how much data you're going to have to store. So the only one that will continue to partition is this. So we had our 4 here, only the last one, the bottom right, continued to have children. It still has these 4. Now at the end, right, we color the nodes. We need to actually say, does it still include an obstacle or not? So in this situation, it was the top right and the bottom right that both had an obstacle. So I would fill in the respective nodes here, yeah. The other 2 are open, right, indicating that they were also free space, and that makes it easy for collisions, for simulations, etc. Now, if we were to look at the other children from the get-go, well, the top right one was also empty, happy days. Now, the bottom right was also happy days. There is one more, which you would recursively partition. I think I'm just going to, I'll leave it as a ... here, but I'll definitely continue to draw it in the map. Now, even though this is like a tiny bit into this region, well, we still need to continue our operations. And things continue, I think, rather obviously. Now, we would do this in the other regions as well. Okay, we would partition this. We would partition this. Yeah, so in this situation, we have to partition everything, right? Then in the regions that make sense, you would also be doing the recursive thing. So this one I got lazy and I didn't draw it all in like the exact correct ordering, right? It's a recursive algorithm, so you do continue to go lower first before you backtrack up and do the rest. Kind of however you choose to implement this. Ta-da. So see again how we really start ending up having these large open regions that represent free space, which is quite nice, very compact, very small and easy to store. And then in the regions where we have obstacles, we continue to essentially gain a higher granularity. To finish the example, okay, so just to make it easier, let's pretend these 3 dots are just in the top one. There's some like slight weirdness, right, where like you have to choose the way you deal with exact borders, yeah? So it's just like you include it in one cell versus the other. You just need like a set rule for that. But ta-da, we have created our first octree. It's pretty simple. Again, so right, 2 was empty, but 3 would have its 4 children, 4 would have its 4 children. In 4, right, again, only 2 of these would continue to have children, and so forth. So the whole tree you can convince yourself of quite easily. Now, how does this relate to an octree, right? So in an octree sense, well, we would be starting with an original 3D data structure, right? There would be, again, obstacles within this space. So let's try to draw something essentially up here at like the top, right? What we'd be doing is instead of splitting it into quads, we split the entire thing into essentially what are kind of voxels, right? I think voxels usually, the terminology I think should be reserved just for uniform sized cells, right? A voxel is the 3D equivalent to a pixel. So whatever we call these 3D cells, you're splitting it into 8, right? So there's going to be 8 blocks you're stacking, and then only within, right, the blocks with obstacles do you continue to do this procedure. So it all works the exact same. I think it's intuitive in that sense. The difference, right, is in 3D, instead of having 4, we have 8. Okay, I can count. So yeah, we have 8 children here, as opposed to each of these have only 4. Okay, so quadtrees are pretty simple as a data structure to understand and to use. There are considerations here. So this is going to be if obstacles move. Sometimes it's quite easy to transition into another cell. So that's more included in things like simulations. In image processing, hopefully the image doesn't change, but we can represent, we're doing this partitioning based on, say, like the color values in an image, things like this. For pathfinding, for search, for spatial search, Well, we would have to essentially dynamically update the map when things change. And that you can kind of do this in these sub-regions, but it's still not easy, it's not quick. So compared to adding and removing obstacles to a standard grid map, right, which is just ones and zeros for whether or not a thing's filled, that's extremely fast to update. Quadtrees require more of this log-n operation, right, of identifying which ones are necessary to update and to essentially change the structure of the tree, which you could do using essentially like this depth-first search. So we've talked about where this is used. Hopefully you probably know if you're interested in Quadtrees or not. For video game developers, I think it's actually very, very exciting as something in your toolkit. You know, standard grids have this advantage of being fast to update, right? So if you have a lot of things to update, maybe standard grids are better because this has a higher cost. And grids also enable things like jump point search, so you can do this really fast pathfinding. But you can also get really, really fast search, probably faster, in something like a well-defined octree, because, right, you can very quickly identify which regions actually have obstacles, so you can jump across free space extremely quickly, right? So if I was in this region over here, this is my start location, this is my goal, well, instead of having to, you know, expand this full thing, well, you could very quickly probably identify a path like this. Okay, now what's interesting here is that there is a trade-off in solution quality, right? We define paths based on the node centers, the centers of these grids. Well, this can include very silly detours. Sometimes you can jump really far. So I guess it would be, so say this was the goal instead, right? If this is goal 2. Well, in this case, look at this silly detour. Instead of going kind of straight there, we've taken this much longer route. So there's issues there, and you can kind of, you know, do this higher resolution search, step in to try to restore the path afterwards. But there is a trade-off in this aspect. They're quick and compact, but solution quality compared to something like a standard grid map can be reduced. Where are Quadtrees limited? I've discussed in a lot of that whole idea, right? The idea that in highly dynamic environments, so when your obstacles move or change, new obstacles appear, some get removed. In these situations, in these hard environments, which is, to be fair, quite common in games, well, Quadtrees then might not be the most applicable because they are expensive to update, right? So depending on your use case, maybe they don't really give you the advantages that you're hoping for. The other version of this, I think, is that, right, so depending on your actual problem, this works kind of well because I had a few obstacles in different parts of the map, and we can see the advantages of some very large open areas and then higher resolution around the things that matter. Well, if your data is really non-uniform, you can kind of start to lose the advantages of Quadtrees altogether. So imagine in a very, very dense map, right? You kind of have this idea that you're still doing a Quadtree, but you still have the harder neighbor checks. And if you're essentially searching the whole thing, well, then a grid just would have been faster. So in very dense environments, then I think grids might just be a better application, as well as the idea that maybe all your obstacles were just in one corner. Yeah. So sure, you get to cull out the other 3 quadrants, but then within that quadrant, well, things again just kind of approximate a grid, and perhaps you're losing the advantages that the Quadtree is offering you in terms of the different iterations and the speed you're hoping to gain from having open regions presented differently. So that is Quadtrees. I think it's a simple but exciting data structure. They're extremely useful for pathfinding in games. But yeah, this is a concept that's used everywhere from image processing, collision detection, ray tracing, simulations. Thanks for watching, and see my next video where I'll actually start to discuss why you might choose grids versus Quadtrees. Thanks.